In May 1943, the Allied forces achieved a decisive victory in Tunisia, capturing roughly 275,000 German and Italian soldiers. Among those taken were German medical officers, who would encounter an experience unparalleled in the history of warfare. They were treated not simply as prisoners but with professional respect as fellow physicians. The following account reconstructs their experience based on verified historical records. The 1929 Geneva Convention had already introduced specific protections for medical personnel taken during armed conflict. These regulations had a profound influence on how German doctors were handled while in American custody. Under the Geneva rules, all prisoners were to be treated equally, which included being paid standard U.S. military wages. Officers could not be compelled to undertake work outside their duties, and medical personnel were explicitly exempt from non-medical labor, retaining certain professional privileges. The United States, as a signatory of the convention, rigorously applied these requirements. For many German medical officers, this was a striking contrast to their previous experiences within the German military system. Prisoners of war were transported primarily on liberty ships returning to the United States, which might otherwise have sailed empty. Each month, tens of thousands, sometimes as many as 30,000, arrived at ports in New York or Virginia, where they were registered and assigned to various camps. From the outset, treatment was markedly humane. The prisoners were served full meals during the voyage, and they traveled in proper accommodations rather than the cramped and harsh conditions common in Europe. These seemingly small measures had a significant psychological impact, signaling the Americans' organizational capability and their approach to humane treatment. By the end of 1943, German prisoners had been dispersed to numerous facilities across the United States. Texas, whose climate was considered comparable to North Africa according to Geneva standards, became home to a particularly large number of camps. Among them were Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, essentially a tent city with 176-man tents shared between prisoners and guards, Camp House in Gainesville, and Camp Hood in North Keene. Medical provisions within these camps often surpassed German expectations. Each camp maintained infirmaries, and some boasted fully equipped hospital units where German medical personnel were permitted to practice their profession. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their captivity was the recognition and respect shown by American medical authorities. Captured German doctors were frequently allowed to treat both German and American wounded, and similarly, detained American physicians sometimes worked under German doctors' supervision. Professional collaboration was common. One American doctor recalled exchanging medical techniques freely with German colleagues, creating opportunities for mutual learning. Overall, the American Medical Corps ensured that care provided to injured German prisoners was comparable to that given to Allied casualties, reflecting a commitment to medical ethics and international law rarely observed in wartime. The experience of German medical officers in U.S. camps thus stands out as an extraordinary chapter in military history, demonstrating that even amidst the hardships of captivity, professional respect and adherence to international conventions could profoundly shape human experience. The respectful manner in which German medical personnel were treated in American prisoner of war camps went far beyond formal gestures. Physicians were addressed by their professional titles, their opinions were sought in clinical matters, and they were invited to participate in medical discussions as colleagues rather than captives. This approach stood in stark contrast to what many of them had anticipated, shaped largely by Nazi portrayals of American society as chaotic, uncivilized, or vindictive toward enemies. American POW camps invested heavily in healthcare infrastructure, signaling a serious commitment to prisoner welfare. One of the most prominent examples was the convalescent hospital at Camp Butner, which alone treated close to 14,000 patients. These facilities were not limited to physical recovery. They also emphasized social reintegration, personal guidance, vocational assessment, technical training, and general education, reflecting a broader philosophy of rehabilitation rather than mere containment. By late November 1945, Camp Butner's medical operation employed approximately 2,200 staff members, supported by 414 German prisoners of war who assisted in various medical roles. Patients in recovery received continuous care day and night. These hospitals served both American military personnel and prisoners of war, creating a shared medical environment in which German doctors worked side by side with American physicians and nurses. In many cases, the equipment, supplies, and overall quality of care exceeded anything German military hospitals had possessed even before wartime bombing and material shortages devastated Germany's medical system. Educational opportunities available to German prisoners, including medical professionals, were strikingly extensive. Nearly every camp maintained a library stocked with donated books and periodicals, some comparable in size and scope to those of civilian secondary schools. At Camp Fannin, for instance, the library held more than 2,500 volumes and reported an exceptionally high circulation rate of about 80%. For German medical personnel, this access was particularly valuable, as it included up-to-date medical texts and journals that had been difficult or impossible to obtain in Germany due to wartime isolation and Nazi censorship of research deemed non-Aryan. Some camps even established limited but remarkable links with American universities. An April 1945 report from Camp Butner noted that 110 German prisoners were employed as mess attendants at Duke University and the University of North Carolina. Although these roles were not medical, the proximity to academic institutions offered German physicians exposure to American medical education and research. Such interaction represented a level of engagement between enemy prisoners and U.S. institutions that would have been unimaginable under the Nazi regime. As the United States deployed millions of soldiers overseas, labor shortages at home grew increasingly severe. In response, German prisoners of war were assigned to work in canneries, farms, mills, and other low-risk industries supporting the Allied war effort. For medical personnel, this often translated into assignments within hospitals and healthcare facilities where their professional expertise could be put to use. German medical officers who volunteered for such duties were compensated in accordance with their rank, as stipulated by the Geneva Convention. Though modest, this pay symbolized official recognition of their professional identity, an acknowledgement that deeply affected men who had expected only humiliation as defeated enemies. The growing number of German prisoners also posed challenges for American medical staff, particularly nurses. Some initially questioned whether they could set aside personal emotions and provide enemy soldiers with the same standard of care. Official policy in theater hospitals explicitly prioritized Allied casualties over prisoners. Yet in practice, most nurses quickly found themselves viewing German patients simply as individuals in need of treatment. Care was administered without discrimination, and German wounded were treated no differently from American soldiers. This seamless professional integration occurred despite early doubts and formal directives, offering German medical officers a powerful example of medical ethics grounded in professional duty rather than political allegiance. German medical personnel were especially struck by the abundance of supplies available in American facilities. Items that had been scarce or tightly rationed in German military medicine, bandages, surgical tools, medications were readily accessible. Pharmaceutical resources were particularly impressive. Sulfur drugs, once carefully conserved in German hospitals, were used freely. By 1944, some facilities had begun administering penicillin, a breakthrough treatment that German medicine had not yet been able to produce or deploy on any meaningful scale. The standard of care provided to German prisoners consistently matched, and at times exceeded, that given to American service members. Wounded Germans underwent the same surgical procedures, received identical medications, and participated in the same rehabilitation programs as USI soldiers. Although the Geneva Convention mandated equal treatment of prisoners of war, such standards were frequently ignored by combatant nations. In American camps, however, this principle was applied with notable consistency, leaving a lasting impression on German medical personnel who witnessed firsthand a system where professional ethics outweighed wartime hatred. During the Second World War, German military physicians who were held as prisoners in the United States found themselves in an unexpected position, not only as detainees, but also as observers and, at times, active participants in a medical system very different from their own. Under American administration, prisoner of war camps adhered to standards of medical care that emphasized parity of treatment, ensuring that enemy prisoners received care comparable to that provided to U.S. troops. German medical officers working within this system were exposed firsthand to American medical ethics, clinical protocols, and organizational structures, experiences that would later shape their professional outlooks after the war. Texas became one of the central hubs for prisoner of war operations, hosting a large number of camps that held German soldiers, including trained medical personnel. Among these facilities was Camp Butner, an expansive installation spanning roughly 40,000 acres across Granville, Person, and Durham counties. Originally designed as a combat infantry training center, Camp Butner supported large-scale maneuvers and housed as many as 3,000 American soldiers during peak activity. German and Italian prisoners transferred there were assigned to various non-combat roles, such as food preparation, maintenance, and logistical support. Within this environment, German medical officers gained access to one of the most advanced military medical infrastructures of the time. As the conflict in Europe intensified and conditions within Germany deteriorated, the contrast between the medical resources available in American camps and those on the collapsing German front became increasingly pronounced. Despite the inherent limitations imposed by the captor-prisoner relationship, professional interactions between American and German medical staff developed in ways that went beyond mere obligation. In clinical settings, mutual respect often replaced hostility, allowing for genuine exchanges of knowledge. American physicians benefited from the extensive battlefield experience of German doctors, many of whom had treated mass casualties under extreme combat conditions. In return, German medical personnel encountered American innovations in areas such as antibiotic use, modern anesthesia techniques, and evolving surgical practices. Post-war memoirs and military documentation reveal that these exchanges constituted a rare instance of structured professional collaboration between opposing forces, something virtually unheard of in earlier modern conflicts. One of the most striking differences observed by German officers was the role of nurses within the American military medical system. Unlike in Germany, where nurses typically functioned under strict physician control, American nurses exercised considerable independence. They participated in clinical decision-making and performed procedures that German medical culture reserved exclusively for doctors. Working alongside these nurses forced German physicians to reconsider long-held assumptions about medical hierarchy and team-based care. Medical exposure was not limited to Camp Butner. In September 1942, Fort Sam Houston, widely recognized as the birthplace of USS's Army medicine and combat medic training, made accommodations for up to 1,000 German prisoners of war while permanent camps were still under construction. As a primary center for military medical education, the fort offered German medical personnel indirect access to American training methods. Although their involvement was largely observational, witnessing how American military doctors were trained provided valuable insight into different educational philosophies and clinical preparation. Dental medicine, often neglected in historical narratives of wartime care, became another area of meaningful professional engagement. German dentists among the prisoners staffed camp dental clinics, where they were responsible for maintaining the oral health of thousands of inmates. Their work was recognized on par with that of physicians. The American commitment to routine dental care rather than limiting treatment to emergency extractions went beyond the minimum requirements of the Geneva Convention and demonstrated a broader philosophy of preventive healthcare. Public health initiatives within the camps further exposed German medical officers to American approaches emphasizing disease prevention and environmental hygiene. German doctors participated in sanitation oversight, epidemic control, and health education programs aimed at maintaining order and wellness in densely populated camps. These strategies stood in contrast to the German military medical system, which largely prioritized trauma care over prevention. The effectiveness of these measures, especially under crowded conditions, served as a compelling demonstration of preventive medicine in practice. Perhaps the most profound influence came from the American approach to psychological health. Conditions such as combat fatigue, later recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, were treated as legitimate medical issues rather than moral failings. German psychiatrists and psychologists among the prisoners observed treatment models that included psychotherapy, structured work programs, and medication. This stood in sharp contrast to prevailing German military attitudes, where psychological collapse was often stigmatized as weakness. Together, these varied experiences formed an unintentional but lasting educational exchange. While shaped by the realities of captivity and war, the exposure of German medical personnel to American military medicine left a professional imprint that extended well beyond the barbed wire of prisoner camps, influencing post-war. The American approach to treating psychological trauma during the war stood in clear opposition to the rigid and disciplinary model that dominated German military psychiatry. Rather than viewing mental breakdown as a failure deserving punishment, American medical staff increasingly treated psychological injury as a legitimate medical condition requiring care, rest, and rehabilitation. With the collapse of Nazi Germany, German medical personnel held in American camps prepared for a return to a homeland devastated by war. Many of these doctors, nurses, and medical officers had lived for 2 years or more in American custody. Ironically, during this period, they often worked under professional conditions that surpassed those they had experienced while practicing freely in wartime Germany. Facilities were better supplied, workloads were more stable, and access to modern equipment and medications was far greater. The process of returning these personnel to Europe involved formal medical screenings and health certifications. These examinations were carried out cooperatively by American and German physicians, marking the final stage of professional interaction between former enemies. This shared responsibility reinforced the sense of mutual respect that had gradually formed during captivity and underscored the professional bonds that transcended wartime divisions. Following repatriation, approximately 5,000 former German prisoners eventually settled permanently in the United States, while many others returned years later as visitors. In rural America, numerous farmers spoke with respect and sometimes genuine affection about the German laborers who had worked on their land during the war. Some of these relationships endured for decades, evolving into lasting friendships. Among the most enduring connections were those formed between medical professionals, who continued to exchange ideas and correspondence long after the war had ended. German medical officers who resumed their careers in post-war Germany carried with them first-hand exposure to American medical systems. They returned with new perspectives on hospital organization, professional ethics, and standards of patient care. Although the precise extent of their influence is difficult to measure, their impact on the rebuilding of German medicine was notable, particularly in discussions surrounding medical ethics, patient autonomy, and professional accountability. American models of medical education also left a lasting impression. German physicians who had observed or participated in American training systems were struck by the strong emphasis on hands-on clinical practice, the close integration of laboratory science with bedside medicine, and the structured, systematic nature of residency programs. In the years following the war, several returning German medical officers became influential educators and administrators, advocating reforms inspired by what they had encountered during captivity. While direct documentary proof linking their reforms to prisoner of war experiences remains limited due to incomplete personal archives, the parallels are difficult to ignore. The historical record of German prisoner medical personnel in the United States is pieced together from a wide range of sources. These include official military documents housed in the U.S., National Archives, inspection reports from the International Red Cross, post-war memoirs and oral testimonies, contemporary newspaper coverage, and camp newspapers produced by the prisoners themselves. Together, these materials offer valuable insight, though they leave unanswered questions about the full scope of professional exchange and informal knowledge transfer that occurred behind the wire. German pharmacists and pharmacologists held as prisoners were exposed to American pharmaceutical practices on a scale previously unimaginable in Germany. They encountered industrial-level drug manufacturing, rigorous quality assurance systems, and efficient nationwide distribution networks. The abundance of medications in American camps, from simple pain relievers to newly developed antibiotics, demonstrated production capacities that far exceeded those of the German pharmaceutical industry during the war. This experience reshaped their understanding of what modern medicine could achieve when supported by sufficient resources and industrial infrastructure, knowledge that later contributed to the reconstruction of Germany's pharmaceutical sector. One of the most tangible areas of professional exchange occurred in surgery. German surgeons, many of whom had refined their skills under extreme battlefield conditions, shared hard-earned expertise in trauma care and emergency procedures. Their American counterparts, in turn, introduced advances in anesthesia, sterile technique, and post-operative management. Despite obstacles such as language differences and security restrictions, this two-way exchange enriched both sides and left a lasting professional imprint. In addition, German laboratory technicians and medical technologists among the prisoners played an active role in camp medical laboratories. There, they conducted routine diagnostic testing and supported daily medical operations. Through this work, they gained familiarity with American laboratory equipment, procedural standards, and quality control practices that often surpassed those used in German military medical facilities. These experiences further broadened their technical expertise and influenced post-war laboratory medicine in Germany. The encounter between German medical personnel and the American military medical system during captivity exposed them to a fundamentally different way of organizing and practicing laboratory medicine. In American facilities, laboratory work followed carefully standardized protocols, supported by routine equipment servicing and meticulous documentation. These practices stood in stark contrast to the improvisational conditions many German laboratories had been forced into during the final years of the war. For German physicians and technicians, this systematic approach became an unexpected blueprint for the reconstruction of laboratory medicine in post-war Germany. Within prisoner of war camps, German radiologists and X-ray technicians were actively involved in operating medical imaging equipment under American supervision. The quality and dependability of American radiological devices made a lasting impression. German personnel, accustomed to keeping aging machines operational with limited spare parts and declining resources, encountered equipment that functioned reliably and produced consistently clear images. This experience highlighted not only technological differences but also the importance of maintenance culture and long-term planning in medical practice. Equally striking were the safety standards embedded in American radiology procedures. Protective measures designed to limit radiation exposure for both patients and medical staff were far more advanced than those commonly applied within German military medicine. German personnel observed systematic shielding practices, regulated exposure times, and strict procedural controls. These encounters played a meaningful role in shaping post-war German radiological standards, as returning professionals carried with them a new awareness of radiation safety as a core medical responsibility rather than an optional precaution. The International Red Cross occupied a central position in mediating the medical experience of German personnel in captivity. Through regular inspections, the organization ensured that medical professionals were treated in accordance with the Geneva Conventions, including recognition of their professional status and assignment to tasks appropriate to their training. In several camps, Red Cross parcels supplemented existing medical supplies, although American military provisioning was generally sufficient. More significant than material aid, however, was the Red Cross's role in sustaining lines of communication between German medical staff and the wider international medical community, preventing complete professional isolation. Intellectual life within the camps extended beyond clinical work. Many prisoner camps produced newspapers written, edited, and read by prisoners themselves. Although these publications were subject to American oversight, they enjoyed a relatively broad margin of editorial freedom. German doctors and medical technicians frequently contributed articles addressing hygiene, disease prevention, and general medical knowledge. Through these writings, medical personnel maintained their professional identities and shared expertise with fellow prisoners. Copies of these newspapers, now preserved in various archives, offer rare first-hand perspectives on how German medical professionals interpreted their captivity and professional responsibilities. Despite obvious restrictions, limited opportunities for scientific inquiry also existed. In certain camps, German medical personnel were permitted to conduct research on non-sensitive topics. Studies often focused on nutritional deficiencies among prisoners or patterns of illness within camp populations. While modest in scope, this research allowed physicians and scientists to preserve essential research skills. Access to functioning laboratories and basic statistical assistance exceeded what many German researchers had been able to rely on in the final stages of the war, when Germany's scientific infrastructure was rapidly collapsing. Public health emergencies within the camps created moments of intense cooperation between American and German medical staff. Outbreaks of infectious diseases ranging from influenza to gastrointestinal illnesses required coordinated responses. These situations provided German personnel with direct exposure to American approaches to epidemic investigation, containment strategies, and large-scale treatment planning. Such practical experience proved invaluable, particularly as Germany faced widespread public health crises in the immediate post-war period. German medical officers also closely observed American systems for managing medical supplies. Unlike the shortages and unpredictability they had known, American logistics emphasized consistent availability, structured inventory control, and the maintenance of emergency reserves. The efficiency of these supply chains demonstrated how modern medical systems could remain functional even under strain. For German officers tasked with rebuilding medical services in devastated cities, this knowledge carried long-term significance. Clinical exposure extended to the treatment of war-related injuries within camp hospitals. German personnel encountered American advances in trauma care, including the widespread preventive use of antibiotics, refined surgical debridement techniques, and detailed wound documentation practices. These methods represented a clear departure from earlier German military protocols and emphasized infection control and long-term recovery. Participation in or observation of these practices influenced the evolution of post-war German trauma medicine, contributing to improved outcomes for civilian patients. Perhaps most transformative was the American emphasis on preventive medicine. Routine health examinations, systematic vaccination programs, and organized health education campaigns illustrated a medical philosophy centered on prevention rather than reaction. For German medical personnel, this approach demonstrated the effectiveness of anticipating disease rather than merely responding to it. The lessons learned in captivity helped shape a more prevention-oriented mindset that would later inform public health policies in a recovering Germany. The organization and operational methods of laboratory medicine in American military facilities provided a significant blueprint for the redevelopment of laboratory practices in post-war Germany. Standardized workflows, consistent equipment upkeep, and thorough documentation practices impressed German medical personnel, who were accustomed to working with deteriorating instruments and limited resources. Within prisoner of war camps, German radiologists and X-ray technicians were sometimes assigned to operate American imaging equipment. The superior reliability and clarity of these devices stood in stark contrast to the aging equipment they had previously maintained, demonstrating the potential of modern radiology technology. In addition to technical proficiency, American protocols for radiation safety, including measures to protect both patients and operators, surpassed the standards observed by German military medical services during the war. Exposure to these safety-oriented practices played a formative role in shaping the approach to radiology in Germany after the conflict. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, acted as a critical intermediary in these experiences, ensuring that German medical personnel were treated according to Geneva Convention requirements. This included recognition of professional qualifications, assignment to appropriate duties, and oversight of working conditions. While American military medical supplies were generally sufficient, Red Cross packages occasionally supplemented essential items, and the organization also enabled German personnel to maintain contact with the broader international medical community. Many prisoner of war camps produced newspapers authored by inmates, and within these publications, German medical staff contributed articles on topics such as public health, disease prevention, and medical advances. Though subject to American censorship, these newspapers afforded considerable freedom and served as platforms for professional engagement, knowledge exchange, and maintaining morale. Archives of these materials today offer valuable insights into the perspectives and professional concerns of German medical personnel during captivity. Some German doctors and researchers were permitted to continue investigative work while in American custody, typically on non-sensitive subjects like nutritional deficiencies among prisoners or patterns of disease within camp populations. Access to laboratory facilities and statistical support enabled these scientists to preserve their research skills at a level often superior to what had been available in wartime Germany, where infrastructure and resources had been severely compromised. Epidemic outbreaks in the camps ranging from influenza to gastrointestinal illnesses required urgent collaboration between American and German medical teams. Participation in these coordinated responses provided German physicians with direct experience in disease surveillance, containment strategies, and mass treatment protocols, skills that would later prove essential in addressing public health challenges in post-war Germany. Observing the logistics of American medical supply management also left a lasting impression. Systematic approaches to inventory control, emergency stockpiles, and distribution networks demonstrated how modern medical systems could maintain consistent availability of resources even under difficult conditions, knowledge that would inform the reconstruction of Germany's decimated healthcare infrastructure. German medical personnel were further exposed to advanced methods in wound care within camp hospitals. The routine application of antibiotics to prevent infection, meticulous surgical debridement, and comprehensive documentation of injuries represented a notable advancement compared to wartime German military practice. Engagement with these practices informed post-war German trauma medicine and contributed to improved outcomes for both military and civilian patients. Finally, the American focus on preventive healthcare within the camps offered German doctors a contrasting medical philosophy. Regular health examinations, vaccination campaigns, and educational initiatives highlighted the practical benefits of proactive medicine. Exposure to these programs reinforced the value of preventive measures, influencing approaches to public health and routine medical care in Germany following the war. Collectively, these experiences ranging from technical training and epidemic management to supply logistics and preventive medicine equipped German medical personnel with insights and skills that would shape the post-war development of medical practice and healthcare infrastructure in their home country. Although preventive medicine was not entirely unfamiliar to German medical practice, it had historically received limited emphasis within the German military, which primarily concentrated on addressing battlefield injuries. During their time in American captivity, German medical personnel were introduced to comprehensive preventive medicine programs, experiences that later shaped their post-war medical work in Germany. The exposure to American approaches in rehabilitation particularly left a strong impression. Unlike German military medicine, which often focused on retiring soldiers as invalids, American rehabilitation emphasized restoring wounded personnel to the highest possible level of function. German doctors witnessed extensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, and vocational rehabilitation programs that far surpassed the facilities and methods available in the German military. This first-hand observation later influenced the evolution of rehabilitation practices in post-war Germany. Communication in American medical practice also differed significantly from German norms. In the United States, there was a strong focus on detailed documentation, patient education, and interdisciplinary dialogue. German physicians noted how these methods promoted clarity, collaboration, and more patient-centered care. The experience of observing these practices contributed to changes in post-war German medical communication, fostering a more integrated and cooperative approach between healthcare professionals and patients. The experience of German medical personnel in American captivity demonstrates that professional identity can persist beyond national rivalries. American military medicine treated captured German doctors as colleagues, allowing open exchange of knowledge and mutual instruction in medical techniques. These interactions established professional relationships that endured well beyond the end of hostilities. While the full scale of knowledge transfer is difficult to quantify, evidence indicates that German physicians gained recognition and professional respect in America that often exceeded their prior experiences within German military medicine. Nonetheless, this professional integration was not without limitations. Security concerns, language differences, and the inherent dynamics of prisoner of war status imposed boundaries. Some American medical staff maintained a formal distance, while a number of German physicians were initially hesitant or resistant to American methods. Despite these challenges, the documented experiences of German personnel in the US represent an extraordinary moment in military medical history. The American decision to engage enemy doctors as respected professionals reflected both compliance with international law and the underlying ethical values of American medicine. The influence of these experiences extended beyond individual officers, shaping aspects of post-war German medical reconstruction. German physicians who trained in American captivity brought back knowledge of new techniques, ethical approaches, and organizational models that informed the rebuilding of German medical practice. Ultimately, the story of German medical personnel in the United States illustrates the capacity of medicine to uphold professional solidarity even amidst conflict. By treating enemy physicians with respect, American military medical institutions not only adhered to legal and ethical obligations but also modeled values that transcended wartime animosities. This historical precedent continues to hold relevance for modern military medicine and international medical cooperation, highlighting the principle that medical professionals share ethical responsibilities that go beyond national allegiance. German officers who experienced American collegiality returned home with more than technical expertise. They carried a deeper understanding that professional respect can endure even in war, that ethical principles in medicine surpass ideological divides, and that former adversaries can become collaborators in the universal mission of healing. These lessons contributed to the ethical and organizational foundation of post-war German medical practice and remain a compelling example of how medicine can bridge divides even in the most challenging circumstances.